Good morning. The fellow named Graham Porter, 101 years old, I believe, used to sit right down here. He made his transition last night, and I went over to see him Saturday as well as did Sandra, and he was in his bed. He'd shrunk down to, he's a little guy anyway, but just a little speck of a man. His three daughters flew in from all over the country, and they were surrounding him, and they were holding him and embracing him. Every once in a while, his little eye would just open up, and he would see us, and he'd smile, and he passed peacefully in his sleep about 2:30 this morning. So we are going to miss him, but he was an incredible man. He'd sit right here. He loved every female that was ever on this stage. I mean, I think Millie Edwards had more lunch dates with him than she's ever had in her life. But anyway, to Graham, Godspeed ahead and bless you on your way. Now, many of you have heard me tell this story before about my cousin Ozzie, but I'm going to tell it again because for those who haven't heard it, it bears retelling. My cousin Ozzie has lived next door to Olga Norberg for 20 years or more. And Olga's a single mom. She has one son, Peter. So Ozzie would oftentimes come over and do odd jobs, and he would became a friend of Peter's. Well, Peter grew up, graduated from high school, and went off to college at the State University, about 60 miles away. He would come home on the weekends to visit with his mom, then he'd go back to school. But pretty soon, his visits became more and more infrequent. And it got to the point where a whole month had passed by, and he hadn't come to visit his mother. So Olga went to cousin Ozzie and said, "Can you just surprise Peter? Tell him that you're in the area and you decide to stop in for a visit. Check up and see how he's doing." Ozzie said, "Sure." So Sunday morning, he gets in his car and he drives up to Brookings, where the university is, finds Peter's apartment, goes up, knocks on the door, and to his surprise, a young woman comes and answers the door. And Ozzie said, "I'm looking for Peter Norberg. Is this his residence?" And she said, "Yes, my name's Allison. Let me get him for you." So she hollers out for Peter, and he comes in, and when he sees Ozzie, he's shocked. He's absolutely horrified because Allison is there, and he's afraid that Ozzie might get the wrong impression. So he started stumbling and stammering about how Allison was his roommate, and they were just friends, and it was almost like a sibling relationship. And he even took Ozzie to show him Allison's bedroom here, and mine's way down on the other end of the hall here. And he just wanted Ozzie to know that he wasn't breaking the moral code of decency from the Lutheran Church, which is living in sin. So they sat down in the living room. They had a great conversation. Allison and Peter decided to go down to the grocery store and get some things for lunch. Ozzie stayed home or at their place and watched TV. They got home, had a very nice lunch. Ozzie got up, bid them farewell, and took his leave. Well, the next day, Allison realized that the sterling silver gravy ladle her grandmother had given her was missing. And they looked all over for it in every part of the apartment, but they couldn't find it. A day or so later, they began to wonder if perhaps cousin Ozzie took it. So Peter wrote Ozzie a letter. He said, "Dear Ozzie, I'm not saying you did, and I'm not saying you didn't, but Allison's sterling silver gravy ladle is missing. Do you know anything about it?" 4 or 5 days later, they get a letter back from Ozzie. He wrote, "Dear Peter, I'm not saying you're sleeping with Allison, and I'm not saying you aren't. But if Allison were sleeping in her own bed, she would have found her silver sterling gravy ladle under the covers." So here we are, almost 1 month into 2018. And I'm sure, like me, most of you at the beginning set resolutions. I'm going to quit this, or I'm going to do this more. And, a couple weeks later, you stop and think, God, was I crazy to say I'm going to stop that? I mean, I'm not going to eat ice cream or cake or pie again? No, it didn't make any sense at all. So a lot of the resolutions just don't stick. Some go on for a little bit. They've been too uncomfortable. And we lose the great desire that we had to improve some area of our life, so we just let them drop by. and others stick and they go on. But I'm going to share something with you this morning. And if we grasp this, it can make 2018 your best year yet. It's just one little thing that we shift our thinking on, and it becomes something totally different than what we have lived with all of these years. Now, in the book of Romans, it says, do not conform to the ways of the world, but transform your mind by refining your thoughts. Do not conform to the ways of the world, transform your mind by refining your thoughts. So this morning, we're going to take a look at the third principle of unity, which is your thoughts create your reality. A lot of times when people hear that, they think, wow, if my thoughts create my reality, I can create anything I want. If I think hard enough, I can get the winning lottery ticket. If I think hard enough, I can become president. If I think hard enough, my husband will start picking up his dirty socks at night. It's like we fall under the illusion that we have this power to create whatever we want out there. And we have very little effect on what goes on out there. Our thoughts create a reality in that we observe what's going on in there, we draw feelings and thoughts around that, that gives us the emotional experience which becomes our reality. If I move into a situation or a circumstance, I have options. I can hate it, I can resist it, I can struggle with it, I can do war with it, that's one reality. Or I can be at peace with it. And I can do something, I can make some sort of a change, either removing my presence from that which is disturbing me, or I can do something within me where I can accept it. Our thoughts create our reality. Our thoughts create the experience we have within us. Now, to totally understand what I'm going to tell you, we need to go back to the very beginning of existence. And this isn't a science lecture, and it's not a physics lecture, but it's very important in regards to what I'm going to say because it tells how we got to this point and the underlying principles that brought us here. So 14 billion years ago, there was what they call the Big Bang. And at that time, there was nothing. There was just a vast, infinite emptiness, no physical matter whatsoever. Then, something the size of an electron, one single thing, the size of an electron, and you can put 50 million electrons on the head of a pin. That's how small it was. One small, singular thing began to expand. It merged into this vast emptiness of the void, and it began to expand, and it got bigger, and it got bigger, and it got bigger, and it expanded out 100 million miles or 100 billion miles, all in less than a second. Now think about that. Where did it come from? Why did it come? And how could it create something out of nothing in such a short period of time? Now, what it created in this expansion was energy. And energy vibrates. That's what energy is. It has a vibration to it. And this particular energy that was created had consciousness. In other words, it had a purpose, it had a drive, it had something within it that directed it towards what it needed to do. So 14 billion later, here we are. That very same energy is in and around everything that exists. It hasn't changed. It's the one energy, the singular energy that came forth at the Big Bang. The consciousness that was there at the Big Bang is still the realm of consciousness that all of us have access to some degree, depending on our awareness. And that energy is divine. That energy is the nature of the universe. That energy and consciousness is the spirit within us. That energy and consciousness is God. God is it all. Now, about 100 years ago, it was discovered that this energy within us has frequencies. A low vibration level is weakening to us. A high vibration level is life-supporting, it's life-affirming, it strengthens us. It is also discovered that our thoughts have an effect on the frequency of the energy. And this spurred the positive thought movement around the last part of the 1800s. And unity was a part of that. And it was positive thoughts strengthen us. Positive thoughts are the source of our well-being. If in your life there's presence of only positive thought, you are well. If there's negative thought, you are not well. And all sorts of principles and different modalities and different practices came into being as to here's how to control your thoughts, here's how to be positive, this is what you must do. And at the same time, there was just as strong a movement in regards to eradicating the negative thoughts. You know, they were called sinful. They were called a mind crime. They were called, some people called it stinking thinking, if you're thinking about a negative thought. So it was all positive and do away with the negative so that we can be happy. And this has gone on for some time now. But the latest scientific research shows us, first of all, life is an emotional experience. If we didn't have emotions, we'd be like automatons or robots just walking around in a very monotonous and dull life. Emotion brings everything alive. No matter what it is we're experiencing, emotion is the basis of that experience. The second thing is that emotions have a purpose. They're not just to make us feel good. They're not just momentarily here to make our day more pleasant, but they have a purpose. They direct us. They guide us. From the very early days of fight and flight, they tell us what is good and what is bad simply by affecting the frequency of our spirit or the energy within us. The fourth thing they've discovered, a thought commonly held by most people in unity, is that positive affirmations are the way to live, and negative thoughts need to be done away with. And that is not true. Negative thoughts aren't bad. I'll go ahead and say it. Negative thoughts are good. They have a purpose. They have a design. They're there to alert us. When we're angry with something, no matter what it is, that anger is an alert. It is a sign that there is something different going on in our lives that needs to change, whether it be momentarily or whether it be on a long term. When we have sadness, sadness brings us to a point where we have greater clarity on the world that's around us. We seem to see things differently than when we're happy. When we have guilt, it is like a moral direction that we might be stepping over the line a little bit when it comes to the beneficial presence we are to the world. And so it is with all negative emotions. They all have their place. Now, in dealing with negative emotions, there's two things that we need to remember. First of all, we have to be efficient with them. Negative emotions aren't meant to last. It's like if you're in your house and the fire alarm goes off. You search out the fire alarm, turn it off, and find out what caused it to go off. Well, sometimes with emotions, it's like an alarm goes off, but we just decide to live with it. We decide to live with the anger, and we suppress it, or we put it away, or we lock it in a closet or something, and we don't address it. And not addressing it, we don't get the message that it sends us. So when I move into a situation or circumstance and I find myself getting angry, it's not to vent anger out at whatever it is or whoever it is. The purpose of anger is to turn me inward and say, why am I getting angry at this? What is it in me that makes me angry just because that person is the way he or she is? And it's the same thing with sadness. If I'm sad, it's not blaming something around me, but rather it's turning inward. What is it that makes me sad about this? And sometimes we don't even know. Sometimes it's hidden. Sometimes we just have sad days. But when we resist those negative feelings, when we try to stuff them away, once again, we don't get the value that comes from them. Emotions are meant to be experienced. They're meant to be a source of direction to help us find out the cause of the emotion, and they're meant to be released. What I'm telling you is that everything is about you. The world goes on. It just is. It is what it is. And we have very little effect on it. But what we do have an effect on is the feelings that come forth from our experience of the world around us. So anytime we move into a situation or a circumstance, our senses perceive what is going on. And then that perception goes to the brain, and the brain releases a chemical of some sort that creates an emotion. If the perception is one of, this might be dangerous, and the brain emits a chemical that creates fear. And that fear is to tell us what to do. It all started with the fear of survival. Going all the way back, if you come across a saber-toothed tiger, you have to do something. And it's that emotion of fear that then tells us, it wraps itself up in thought and says, run, climb a tree, do something. And it's the same thing in our everyday life. When we begin to experience different emotions that aren't so easy, that feel a little bit difficult, it's simply a sign that here's a message for me. And whatever this emotion is, it's not for me to reject. It's not for me to try to get rid of or to deem it as some pesky critter that is crawling into my basement. It's actually to embrace it, just like you would a crying baby. There is something that needs to change, and well, that's kind of a bad comparison when you're talking about babies, but they are there to help us, is the point I'm trying to make. Now, what happens mostly if we get mad and we're good spiritual students? We get mad because we're mad. We get angry at ourselves because we're angry. Anybody experience that? I get angry, 15 minutes later, God, I shouldn't have gotten angry. Or if I'm sad, I get more sad because I'm sad. Or if I'm anxious, I get more anxious because I'm anxious. We double down on the emotion, we step back, we blame ourselves, we beat ourselves up, and it just exacerbates or expands the negative emotion that we have, and it becomes bigger and bigger part of our perceptive abilities. So as we move into meditation, I just want you to think about this. Everything is an emotional experience. Our emotions have purpose. They're not just the fringe. Our emotions affect our energy level. They strengthen us or they weaken us. And the negative emotions, even though they weaken us, they set an alarm off or a direction is put out that tells us something is a little bit off. We see this all the way through nature. It just isn't with humanity. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at the Earth right now, the Earth isn't particularly well. The Earth has its problems with climate warming and pollution and the chemicals and all this other stuff. And we see this and we're living with it rather than addressing it. And that's very much what we do with our own lives. If we have anger in there, we know anger's there, we know what we're angry about, and we just live with it rather than taking some sort of an action to eliminate it, whatever that cause is. It's all about you. Whatever you're feeling, it's all yours, and you can do whatever you want with it. You're just taking that time to pause and then go back to the source. Think about that as we move into meditation.